Good evening, everyone. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. It's my absolute delight to welcome you to tonight's 175th anniversary lecture series on the important topic, of course, of exploring the history and current research of British Sign Language here at Moray House School of Education and Sport. It's a special event and I'm delighted it's on this topic, and I'm delighted to see all of you here, whether in the room with us in person and also those of you who are joining online, indeed from all over the world. My name is Professor Carol Campbell and I am the new head of school of Moray House School of Education and Sport, and I want to acknowledge Sam Faulkner, who's at the back of the room, who's been our interim head and led us through the past 7 months. This is day 2 on the job for me, and it's been a wonderful 2 days. Thank you. The first day was welcome week, so I got to spend it with lots of new students. And today I'm here with you, and I can't think on a better way to be here than to talk about the work on British Sign Language and the important research you're going to hear about tonight. We have a 175-year legacy of excellence in sport and in education and in contributing around the world. And central to that is, of course, our commitment to inclusivity, accessibility, equity, social justice, and supporting change and transformation. And British Sign Language has been at the absolute heart of the work of Moray House School of Education and Sport, pioneering work, including by my colleagues that you're about to hear from, 2 extremely distinguished speakers. And we're proud of our history in British Sign Language. So first, let me introduce Rachel O'Neill, a senior lecturer in deaf education at Moray House, whose remarkable career in the field of the deaf community spans nearly 5 decades. Rachel's journey began 49 years ago as a play worker at Derby School for Deaf Children, before she went on to pursue her history degree at the University of York. She later trained as a teacher of deaf children at the University of Manchester, where she spent 25 years working with deaf children and young people. Rachel's academic achievements are equally impressive. She earned a master's in English language at the University of Manchester, and her additional training in English as a second language has shaped her rigorous approach to supporting a diverse range of deaf and deafblind learners. Since joining Moray House in 2006, Rachel has led the deaf education pathway of our MSc Inclusive Education, training teachers of deaf children across Scotland. Her research spans areas from improving access to literacy for deaf children to shaping the professionalism of teachers in this field. She is a co-editor of the Journal of Deafness and Education International, and has been a leading voice and is a leading voice in shaping language policies, including the pivotal British Sign Language Scotland Act. Since 2008, Rachel has worked closely with her colleague, Audrey Cameron, on the University of Edinburgh's BSL plan. So thank you, Rachel, for being here tonight. Now, I'm equally pleased to introduce Dr. Audrey Cameron, OBE, a Chancellor's Fellow here at Moray House. Audrey's cutting-edge work focuses on using sign language to unlock complex scientific concepts. She leads the internationally recognized STEM, science, technology, and mathematics BSL glossary project, collaborating with 40 deaf scientists, sign linguists, and educators from across the UK. This work ensures that the scientific terminology in BSL is accurate, accessible, and empowering for deaf students and professionals alike. Audrey's recent accolades include an honorary fellowship from the Royal Society of Chemistry, an OBE for services to deaf education and STEM, and an honorary doctorate of education from the University of the West of Scotland. Her connections with Moray House began in 2003, when she completed her PGCE, and she has since worked as a research fellow with the Child Protection Research Centre, collaborating with Professor Debbie Fry. Tonight, Rachel and Audrey will take us on a journey through the groundbreaking work of Mary Brennan, who in the 1970s was one of the first linguists in the UK to describe BSL as a language in its own right. Her revolutionary work at Moray House laid the foundation for the advancements in BSL recognition and usage that we benefit from today, and we are very proud of that legacy. But tonight's lecture isn't just about looking back, it's about celebrating the present and looking to the future. Rachel and Audrey will show how Mary Brennan's legacy continues to shape Scottish policy, particularly around children's rights to use BSL. They will also share the latest research here at Moray House, including innovative work on BSL in the classroom and on language policy. So as we reflect on 175 years anniversary here at Moray House, our commitment to BSL, to inclusivity, accessibility, equity, and excellence remain as strong as ever. So whether you're here with us in the room or whether you're joining us from afar, I hope you enjoy tonight's lecture. I am sure it will be a wonderful lecture with two distinguished colleagues, and thank you for being here. I can't think of a better way to spend my second evening as head of Moray House. So thank you and welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Karen, for a lovely introduction. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for joining us online and also in the room. So we're going to take turns presenting today, and we're going to show you some of the work that's been done, some of the videos that we've found, which I think you'll find enjoyable. So if you could just have the next slide, please, Pauline. So first of all, we're going to talk about Mary Brennan's legacy and her incredible influence on the work that's been done here and in the future. We're going to talk about exams in sign language, the BSL glossary project, what's been going on, research arising from the BSL glossary project, and then Rachel will end with some comment about the impact of the BSL Act. I'm sorry, could you not? Can I just check that you can hear at the back? I'm just going to check people's faces. Is that a little bit louder? Maybe we can turn it up a bit more. Can we do that? Is that any better in the room? Thumbs up if it seems a little better. Good. Okay, super. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So yeah, so I'll hand over to Rachel, who will kick us off and talk a little about Mary.
Okay, so Mary Brennan was a lecturer when this was a college of education. It wasn't at that time linked to the university. And she became interested in sign language and started to learn it, and then produced what was a very important article in our field of deaf education, published back in 1975. It was published in the American Annals of the Deaf, but also in the British Deaf News. I remember reading it, and it was quite an article because it was challenging the traditional method of teaching deaf children spoken English, which was not very communicative. Basically, the child was told off if they didn't say it right, rather than actually communicating. Mary brought in that article a devastating attack on the existing methods, which was quite brave of her because these were very highly revered people at the time. So that's really worth reading still, that article. And she understood child language development. She was clearly a very good linguist. So from there, she became more interested in the deaf community. She had contact with Martin Colville, who is with us here today, all the way from Cheshire. He was here working, teaching sign language to social workers and teachers. And together they applied for some money from the Scottish government, from this what was then the Scottish office, to fund a project. So this project we're going to talk about more, because we actually got many of the people who were here. Some of them are in the room today, which is great. So the BSL, I hope I haven't missed anyone out here. The BSL research team included Lillian Lawson, sitting on the front row, Martin Colville, sitting at the back. Do you want to give a wave, Martin? Clark Denmark, who is not with us, but hope will watch this later. Clive Mason and Jerry, I know, maybe online. Maureen, who is maybe online as well, and George Scott, who is sadly not with us anymore. So this team was a mixture of paid workers and volunteers. And Lillian has told me, I have done a project, a sort of history project around this. So my evidence comes from some of the people sitting in this room. Lillian had video cameras and would go and film people. Particularly Mary was interested in filming deaf people from deaf families to look at their signing. Not necessarily the leaders of the community who were very good at English, but the deaf people with the best quality BSL. So that team is an amazing team. Many of them, you will perhaps have seen them on TV. Clive Mason particularly, and Clark Denmark Clark Denmark was a volunteer on this project, but he was terrifically good. So we're going to find out a little bit more about how this project worked. One of the very early things that the project did was to broadcast to the whole of the UK a programme on Horizon. Now, if you cast your mind back, if those of you who are old as me, to 1981, there were actually only 3 channels at that time, and the BBC Two had serious programmes, Horizon, and Mary got on Horizon. And we're going to show you a little clip, a very short clip of this programme. And she was presenting BSL as a language, as a proper language, and she was presenting it. Notice how her accent, and notice the background, the technical nature of the charts. She was creating an image, very important image, because it was trying to challenge a prejudice against BSL, which was very strong, particularly amongst teachers of deaf children, I'm sorry to say. So let's have a little clip. Thanks. I'm sorry for those of you who are hearing not very good sound quality, but I hope you're able to read the subtitles. So you can see how she was presenting the language as a formal language. It had a system, which you don't understand completely, but it looks impressive. So I managed to track down the archive about the audience who watched this. And it was actually 1.7 million people. Based on scaling up their survey from their panel, which was a few thousand members, it had a very positive response from the audience. And it drew a very negative response from the teachers of deaf children through their magazine, who were shocked because they didn't expect this. So now I've got a clip which shows Jerry Hughes. Now, Jerry Hughes is a really important person. As many of you will know, he subsequently sailed solo around the world. But he also was a teacher of deaf children, one of the first teachers of deaf children who's deaf themselves. He worked on this project as a paid worker shortly after Lillian. Lillian and Jerry swapped on this project, I think. And so Jerry is explaining in this clip how Mary got him interested in the project and showed him what the job was, that they were going to analyse the language. And he realised he had the resources in him to analyse the language that was his own.
You see that Martin has been explaining about the videotapes. What are they for? They're for deaf and hearing people. Let me explain to you about my involvement in the research. And I started to realize, because I could see it was very important. When I started and became involved, I was signing with Mary, and she would explain things to me, and I'd sign to Martin, and there was no problem there. And we'd start with video. I said, why video? there was a deaf person signing there. Oh, I know him. I don't know him. Who's he? Ah, and I'd watch. And Mary would tap me and say, what have you noticed? And I'd explain what I'd noticed. And Mary would say, but you've told me that, but how do you know? I'd say, oh no, here we go again. I've got to start again. So I'd tell her again, no, I don't mean that. Those facial expressions in those signs like awful and terrible, what do you mean? Oh, but that's the deaf's way. That's how I started to become aware.
Right. Okay, this was Jerry on one of the clips of the video made by, I'll tell you more about those 10 videos in a minute, but Jerry was explaining the method of work. And the method of work was Mary showed him a clip and then asked him, what's the difference between these two things? What's the difference between these two signs? What does the facial expression mean? What actual function does that have? And he realized that he really hadn't ever analyzed the language that he used every day. So this was another quote from Clark Denmark, who was a volunteer on the project. I'm going to read this quote to you. I interviewed him about his role on the project, which Mary tried a different approach working with Clark. He said, then she filmed me and I didn't stop to analyze it. I just signed it. At the end, Mary thanked me. I said, then I realized it was because I wasn't aware of it at the time, called the productive lexicon. She was right, because in my normal life, I didn't use signs like that. But when I told a story, it was full of new signs. I had made them myself. I was amazed. It was clever of Mary to do. Only later did we analyze what we had done. We were not aware of how we were using placement. There had been no work on that. It was a huge job to spot all the features of the language. So what Mary did with Clark, who was a highly bilingual young man, was give him a book, tell him to read it, and then tell him to translate it. And he brought to this reading a lot of productive features of language which hadn't been analysed previously. That's a picture of him reading a book. So then the project decided to make some teaching videos. The audience for these videos was probably deaf teachers, but also hearing people who wanted to learn the language. Now, funnily enough, in Manchester at that time, I was trying to learn BSL. But the way I learned BSL was there's a list of signs on paper, and then there was a dialogue which you had to learn by heart. You're not allowed to deviate from that dialogue. And then I met 3 sign language teachers who'd all been on a course taught by Mary. And I got secondhand her teaching, which was really interesting from the project. So the project made 10 videos, which we are, through lottery funding, going to put online. They've been in the Scottish Sensory Centre a long time. We've got a marvellous young video guy who is cleaning them up. We've got pneumatic videos, we've got VHS, we've got digital, and we're getting the best possible version online. With us today, we have Martin Colville, and he was the crucial introducer of the videos. And then in amongst that, his introductions and teaching, there were clips of BSL, anecdotes, stories, jokes, discussions, and panel games. The panel games were put in, I think, to illustrate things that hearing people and deaf people were really using very different ways of communicating visually. So first of all, here's an example of Martin signing in signed English. Now, the media at the time, early 80s, if you watched a program such as See Here, it would have signed supported English, signing and talking at the same time. This was to make it easier, I guess, for hearing people. So he was doing the explanation, and then, yeah, let's have a look.
Let's start with a pictorial sign. The sign boat itself is a very pictorial sign. The linguistic term is iconic. And because this is an important concept in relation to sign language, it's worth giving it to you. If the sign is iconic, that means there's a link between the way the sign is made and what it means. So in the sign boat, we can say the hands give an indication of the shape of the boat. But probably we're also getting some important information from the way that the hands are moving, showing the movement of the boat through the water.
Now that's only a little taster of the tapes. There were actually 10 of these tapes, which we will eventually see online, probably by next February or March. I think we'll have them all on the Scottish Sensory Centre website. As well as that, they had panel games. And I'm going to show you an extract from a panel game. They had 3 hearing members of staff from Moray House and 3 members of the deaf research team to see how they signed a word in English. And what they were looking for was there a standard way of signing this? How did hearing people tackle this? A bit like mime at Christmas time or charades. The word that they're doing is levitation. So first you see 3 hearing people who are all working at Moray House, and then you see the 3 members of the Edinburgh BSL project.
Lovely. Anna.
Levitate. No, he's got the wrong word.
Yeah.
Levitate. This
God. Jerry. Maureen. Clark.
And you can see that although there might not be exactly one sign per word, because between languages there isn't always a one-to-one correspondence at all, what you see the 3 deaf members in the team doing is using one or more variation of a classifier, which might be a body like that, or it might be like that. So this was part of the thing that Mary and the team were investigating, was what is a classifier in sign language? What role does that play? How does it work? And I think Clark used the most simple example. But, you know, Jerry Hughes himself used quite a mime-like start to that clip. So that was fun. And one of the other interesting things about it is you can really see Moray House staff were really enjoying this project. They were joining in with gusto, and it was obviously a popular thing that was going on. So from these teaching videos, another very important publication came, which was, sorry, I've gone a little bit wrong here. From these teaching videos, as I've already said, we're going to get them online. And we got some funding last year from the Heritage Lottery Fund, and we're cleaning them all up. And hopefully we're also having 3 events during the year. I think we'll count this one as one of them because so many people have come. And then we're doing an event for children and an event hopefully with Deaf History Scotland. I'm hoping we can do that. The year will end in March next year. Lillian does know this already. So this will mean we'll get a lot of feedback and hopefully focus groups as well for people reminiscing about those times, because they're not that long ago, but sometimes, you know, people are getting older. It's good to capture what they remember of it. And Sheila Mackenzie is here tonight, and Ben Glover has helped us with the videos. So this book, Words in Hand, was a very important product of the BSL project at Moray House. And it introduced the basics of British Sign Language, which hadn't previously been discovered or discussed. And it was also quite accessible, very visual. It showed the 5 parameters of sign: the hand shape, the orientation, the movement of the sign, the facial expression of the sign, and the location on the body. So these were the basic building blocks of phonemes, if you like, in the language. And it also told us about non-manual features and the meaning that that gave to signs, which was sometimes not expected. And that was one of the things that Jerry was working on when he was looking at facial expression that went with different signs, which had meaning. it had added additional meaning. And so also in this book are minimal pairs. Now, if you're a linguist, you'll know what a minimal pair is. It's a phoneme of the language, which is very different from just a little bit different in one respect to another phoneme. And it is a difference in meaning. So this book found minimal pairs in British Sign Language that were I'll just give you a quick example, like Britain and today. Can you see the feature which is different there? It's to do with the orientation of the hand. So there are lots of these in the book, and it became an important textbook for people studying BSL. Some of you in this room will remember using it. Now, in 1987, the project here stopped and Mary moved to Durham. But the work carried on at Durham, and then later on she came back. So I'll just briefly tell you what happened in Durham, because it was very important for BSL in the UK community. Many of the people who were involved in the Audrey project continued to work with her in Durham. And then David Breen, who's also in the room from Durham University, also came on board. I think, Liz, you probably were involved in Durham a little bit as well. So the dictionary was produced in 1992. That was a great landmark. It was a big dictionary, and you could access it if you were a BSL user to find the English word from a sign. It was organized not alphabetically, but by hand shape. So that was quite revolutionary and complex, and it was all on paper. It was heavy. I remember in the college I taught in Manchester, I had 10 of them, and I taught the students how to use it, which was quite slow, but now it's all on a little app. Not this dictionary, but the same idea is now possible much more easily on video. So at Durham, the BSL Tutors course was established and a Master's in Deaf Studies. And these were very important for the deaf community, that those teachers spread across the UK and the quality of sign language teaching completely changed. I saw that happen because I got videos where I was asked to look out for things that were happening and where they were happening, completely different from the word lists that I've had in my early classes. So it was all really, a lot of it was from the work of the Moray House BSL project. So that was a very positive phase. And then, by the way, the dictionary was produced in collaboration with the British Deaf Association, which I know David spent many hours working in Carlisle with the BDA. So then she moved back, and at that point, Moray House was becoming part of the University of Edinburgh. So quite a different change came about. And here's a picture of Mary receiving a medal. I think I was there at that BDA conference when she got the Medal of Honour. She did important work when she came back. And one of the things she did was establish a group which was about BSL and linguistic access. Now, it was quite clever to do this, and she did it in collaboration with the Sign Language Association, SASLI, and with other people such as Lillian, who's here, setting up a group which was balanced about linguistic access. This was a very good idea. It wasn't just about BSL access, it was about linguistic access. So it was including everybody who was deaf and about the rights of access to the curriculum and to schooling. Book produced in 2003, and then from that and the involvement of SCOD, the Scottish Council on Deafness, there was a group set up which met quite often here at Moray House. And this group really became the way of starting up the pressure up for a BSL Act. And that group was very good because it drew in people from a wide range of backgrounds, not just BSL. It was a clever move. So although Mary passed away in 2005, that group carried on. And when I arrived in 2006, I could step right in, which I was very grateful for because it was really interesting. The BSL bill consultations happened twice, 2010, 2012. There were various reasons to do with whether it was a dissolved matter or not, but we got through that. And then finally in 2015, the bill became an act. And in that bill, one of the things that was brilliant was how deaf people were able to contribute using BSL on video, on Facebook, to contribute their viewpoints. And I think really Mary would have loved that, to see that huge amount of outpourings of feelings about the language and their rights and their lack of rights. But it was it wasn't all based on Mary, I might say, but you can see that the progress was there. And a lot was based on the project which had started here. So now I'm going to hand over to Audrey, who's going to carry on the story and talk about another part of Mary's work, which we are both still involved with, which is about BSL in school exams for deaf children.
Thank you. That's just so interesting. I was completely captivated by it. Yes. I can just check people can see me. Okay. So hello there. So I want to now talk about Mary's influence in the arena of exams. And as you can see on the picture or the photograph on the overhead there, you have a deaf pupil with a teacher who is translating the questions from an exam paper. And the student is able to respond in sign language. Now, this wasn't a typical or normal event historically, but because of Mary's work, deaf children were given the right to be able to respond to their exams in their own first language. And I think it was the SQA at the time, the approach was made to them and they approved from 2004 that this would be the way that deaf students could participate in exams. So we have Mary to thank for that proposal. But I think you know what Mary's like, that wasn't the end of the story. She could see that there were gaps in the signing that were taking place in questions. For example, science questions, where terms were having to be fingerspelled. So she invited Jerry to come every week over here to Moray House for a period of 2 years, and he produced some early signs for maths for the glossary. So she came, you know, he came down on she went down on bended knee and he reluctantly came over and contributed to that. And they came up with a pilot of a number of signs in maths, which proved to be very, very popular. So we've carried on the work from Mary's legacy here. We have more signs, but we still have this concern about the capacity of teachers to be able to translate signs and exams, because what happens is they just get sight of the exam paper an hour beforehand, and often they don't have access to the language. And we know that deaf children, their response to this was to look at it and think, you know, I'm not really sure what the question, they didn't really have confidence in the interpretations that were being given. So they came up with a digital version, or they trialed a digital version of the exam paper, apologies. And this is an example of that. So it's a PDF, with the exam paper is a PDF, yeah? And you can click on the question and Gary Quinn pops up in a video like this and translates the question for you into BSL. And that meant that the deaf students could click on the questions, they could answer the questions in BSL, they didn't have to rely on the teacher's translation of them, because I think a lot of the deaf pupils were really rather concerned about going to the teacher and say, sorry, can you repeat that for me? I didn't quite understand it. So it got around that problem and it gave them some control. So Gary and I then went to 6 deaf schools throughout Scotland to have a look at how these exams were being run, rather like in the picture above here. And they had the normal amount of time, and all of these students passed those exams. We asked the students what they thought of these videos that are embedded in the PDFs, and they said, you know, it gave us more confidence. And this is one of the quotes that we got from one of the teachers, you know, that the quality of the translation, they knew that the quality of the translation wasn't very good given the amount of prep time that they had, but Gary's version of them was much clearer. And the response we had was that 97% of them thought that this was the way forward. But this kind of happened at a time when qualifications were changing from standard grade to what we have now, which is Nat 5, which wasn't really a good time to be trying to add what they saw as an extra layer of complexity. So we now have a PhD student. Sorry, maybe I should, yeah, so we now have sample questions on they have sample questions on the SQA website so that students can now practice those. Okay. So these are opportunities for students to look at exam papers in the way that other students do, deaf students to have a look at those exam papers. So I just want to go back to just talk about this really important area of giving deaf children access to exams in an equitable kind of way, access to quality translations. And we're waiting for Eileen Burns to finish her PhD thesis, which will illustrate some of the issues around this. And we are in continuing conversations with the SQA around this issue because, well, and we know that partly because of the involvement of our new director, that a new head of school, that there will be a change in the exam system going forward. Okay, so this is one of the key areas of work that I'm involved in, and it arises out of the work that Jerry did with the maths glossary that I mentioned earlier on. We now have 10 subject areas that are covered and a total of 4,000 different signs. So the aim of the project is to try and support deaf children in school to increase participation and involvement in science. We'd like to thank the pots of money that we've got from these various organizations. Without them, we would not have been able to expand the glossary in that we have. Most of these, as you can probably see, are probably science-based organizations and institutions. And it's interesting that once they've seen the value of the science and how they improve understanding, that they've been really keen to fund us, not with huge amounts of money, I might say, but probably more with dribs and drabs of funding from them. Some of you might not have seen the SSE glossary website. It looks pretty much like this. There are themes on one side, and then there is an A to Z kind of version where you can pick either a theme and it will show you a sign, or you can pick a term that begins with a particular letter, and those will appear in the drop-down menu. And as you can see, it's ourselves, the Scottish Century Centre, and the collaboration was also with Heriot University with Gary there, who is an assistant professor of sign linguistics. I should just say I'm a chemist, so it's, along with Rachel as an educational, it's kind of a dream team, a perfect team. I mentioned the drop-down menus on the glossary website, but we want to be able, the deaf children, to go home and have a look at the website and click on the various the subject areas and terms there. And what they will see is they will see on the one hand a sign, but that's not really enough for many students. So we've provided a definition and explanation of those terms on the other side, as you can see on the screen here. So 2008, we did a little bit of work with young people, asking them what they thought of this format. And the feedback that we got was there should be more examples. And we have an example of one of those videos here. I don't know whether we can we play this? Yeah, it should be a video there, Pauline. This is John Dennerly presenting. And he is presenting the sign for omnivore, which is animals that eat both plants and meat, rather like us. And this is a lemur, which is an omnivore. You can see it eats both meat and it eats plants as well. And it's a member of the primate family. You could just hear the roar just came on in the background just there because it wants feeding. So it eats things like fruit and vegetables, eggs, small mice, baby chickens. So that's what we feed it. So it eats both. It's an omnivore. Okay. So I think examples are really, really good for deaf children because they get an opportunity to see how they can use the term, how it links to the meaning of it, rather than just using the sign without any real understanding of the word itself. I remember 2007 when we started the project, and I remember I was incredibly nervous when Rachel approached me, but she was very reassuring, and she said, "Well, we need, you know, we need something else. We need to do some experiments." So I set up a whole load of experiments in Moray House, and I invited people to come in, and only Gary turned up. And he was looking at this room with a whole raft of experiments that were set out, and I gave him a lab coat. and I started filming him. And we then started to do science shows together later down the line. So Gary's the kind of person who's happy to try absolutely everything. I think there's a problem with the autofocus online. Is that just coming up as a comment? Hopefully it's settled down just a bit now. So I want to say a little bit about, shuffle over here. Can you still see me? Okay. I want to say a little bit about how I can't really talk in any depth about how we create the signs, but we follow some basic principles. The teams must be deaf-led. We do work with hearing experts as well, but the project needs to be deaf-led, because I think typically in the past, these kind of projects were run by teachers who were creating signs or interpreters. I mean, I know there was a need to create signs, but that was okay, but it needed to be deaf-led. We have a team from all over the UK who are deaf scientists, deaf sign linguists, teachers, all of them deaf, as I say. And Gary kind of has the responsibility to oversee the linguistic part of it. And we spent hours and hours talking about the meaning of specific terms. We're not just looking for a translation of a word into a typical generic sign. So for example, black and hole, it's not a black hole in the sky. So that's why we look at it. It's basically a star that has imploded in on itself and under huge forces of gravity to become infinitesimally small. So it's not a glossed black hole as such. Yeah? So we get into the concept and the idea of it, and that's how we create the science. We're not focusing on the English language, we're focusing very much on the kind of concept. Let me introduce the team. We've reached 40 this year, which is great. We started off very small. There weren't really that many deaf scientists around. We started with 7. Some of them have actually been through their education alongside the glossary. And I want to thank them for all their hard work, their sweat and toil, and their creative energies. And sometimes a bit of a debate between us about what things mean, but we've always come up with the ideal sign in the end. These are a couple of photographs of some of the conversations that we've been having. You can see we've got books on the table, and there are conversations like, no, I think it means this, I think it means that. The people around the room are all experts in their area. But we're thinking about how we can create something that is visual, and you can't get away with something that if it's wrong and it's visual. So we have to be really careful about that. During COVID, we didn't give up. Because of COVID, we moved online. So we went to Zoom, and actually that worked really, really well, because we could start to even record how the science had developed during our conversations. And Tanya's I see Tanya in front of me. She's up on the screen just there. So Zoom was great. You know, people could stay at home. You could join online in your jammies. It was all very relaxed. And that was the one that we did around computer science. So we had 12 weekends, Saturdays, Sundays. We did a whole load of events together. We didn't really have anything else to do because it was COVID, so it was kind of perfect in that sense. So this project benefited deaf children, but it also benefited us as members of the glossary team, because we had opportunities finally to talk about our passion for science. Very often we'd found ourselves on our own, struggling to communicate with others. And this project gave us as scientists and linguists and teachers a sense of belonging, as is suggested in the quote that's on the screen in front of you. So the benefited both sides of the equation. I know most of you probably know these signs. I've showed you these signs before. I might be repeating myself, but I love this so much that I wanted to show you. It's just a way of how the sign can help with understanding. So if we think about the term of mass, we created this sign, which is mass, which is already showing you here. If you can just copy me, yeah. So everything has mass, which is represented with this closed fist. But there's kind of quite a complicated relationship between mass and weight. We have a sign for weight, but really weight is a force acting on mass. Okay, so that's what weight is in technical, as a technical term. And what is that force that I'm talking about? Just looking to you or looking around the room, what is that force? It's gravity, thank you. And the sign that we have for gravity is this one, which is pulling things to Earth. So we have a sign for gravity and we have a sign for mass, and we bring them together and we end up with this sign for weight. So on the Earth, we're quite heavy, I guess, but I would be a lot lighter on the moon, and I can show that intensity with the way that I present the sign. So if we just put the three together, as you can see them on the screen here. So we can use these signs to teach scientific concepts. And this is a really nice example of how you could do it. It's not vocabulary based. It's designed to create understanding and conceptual understanding. So who uses the glossary project? I mean, the initial aim was for deaf children to use it, but other people have also find it really, really useful. So we're hugely grateful to the team for having produced the signs in the glossary. I mean, Rachel has already said something about STEMist. So it could be maths, it could be engineering, it can be technology. So it's STEMist, sorry, STEMists. You're on the next video, Andy, just a little heads up here.
So this is the sign for greenhouse gases, and that's a new one. I didn't know that one before.
So in physics, for example, some of the concepts are really abstract, and sign language can help children understand, because it's a visual language. So this is a sign for photosynthesis. So here we have a leaf, and this is the sun. It's light energy, and it's absorbed into the leaf, which then creates something. It creates food.
I really like science, and I love learning it, and it's easier to learn when we have the signs.
So that was last year, where we released an element of the glossary, and it went viral via the BBC. And it just shows the potential of these signs to develop and improve communication. And here's just another wow moment where the glossary has popped up in the Scottish Parliament, no less. This is First Minister's question time. You see the sign used there by the interpreter on screen? So can I just thank you, Andy, for using the sign? I really appreciate it. And this year we did some work with Edinburgh Science Festival, who produced these absolutely ginormous posters like this one, which were absolutely incredible. And they really loved the signs. And we were trying to work out how we would use the signs to help them with that. And you see the signs from the glossary being used on the BSL zone. That was just last week that was broadcast. As a new science program for deaf children that you might have come across. The other thing we've done recently, last year, we looked at a different way of developing signs. In the past, I've mentioned that we did Zoom and we've used books in the past, but we went down to the Science Museum, the National Collection Centre. And the Science Museum have a lot of things that they just can't display. So they're kept kind of in an archive centre or in a massive storage centre down south. So we were invited to go down and have a look at some of the historically significant objects that they have, and invited to come up with signs to represent those things. I can't really show you much of the video, but I'll just show you a little clip of it. So it was a new way for us to develop science for the glossary. So it was the Science Museum in collaboration with Royal Holloway University down in London. So a nice collaborative piece of work. So if we could just see a little bit of that, Maureen, Pauline, if we've got time, just a short clip of it.
Every year, countless new scientific terms come into use. But each breakthrough discovery and pioneering concept represents a new challenge for the deaf community. The British Sign Language Glossary Project is focused on developing new sign language signs which represent the ever-evolving lexicon of science.
So I think now we're becoming more creative, more imaginative. We're developing partnerships in different areas. We're not just in the one room, coming together, developing our science. We're doing different projects. We're now, more recently, we've been involved in something called the MUFFIN project, which is the Marine Underwater Fish for Inclusion project, which we've shortened to MUFFIN, not the kind that you eat, but just as a sign. And the sign that we've produced for the project is this one. So we have 5 countries in Europe collaborating on this together, from Italy, Malta, Croatia, and where else? Here, I think, yes. So 5 countries, and they've all brought their own funding, and we also have Erasmus funding as well. And it's really an international deaf, where we're coming together using international science to try and understand and develop some of these science. And we're using the same methodology for creation of signs that we've used in the glossary project here. I mean, we'll also be looking to come up with a marine center, trying to contact marine centers. And we're going to be doing that in 2026 to see if we can run like a week's event for deaf children, which I'm super excited about. And we need to make 12 videos over the period of the project linked to climate action. And hopefully Lee, our PhD student, is going to be interested in that. I'm just looking to see what she is. And there will be some information there around what is going to be happening around the translating of those signs. So there'll be more films that will be coming along with that. We've also not just been working on the BSL glossary project. We're aware that there are other glossary projects around the world, and we're not copying one another, but we are looking to collaborate around the work that we're doing. We've had our Global Year of STEM Sign Language Lexicons, which has been really exciting. And it is interesting, though, that most of the glossary projects are deaf-led, and their methodology is very similar. They've borrowed or used our methodology, so the work is being done in the same way. In terms of how they come up with signs, that's, we respect that that's happening differently depending on languages and where people are doing it. But they are using our methodology. At the end of the year, we came up with these kind of 4 themes to try and develop the work of glossary projects around the world. And we're hoping to continue to create new signs, enhance diversity, think about who develops these signs. There's an ethical consideration. Maybe thinking about how AI might have a role to play in the development of science going forward. My real area of passion is teaching, and the teaching of deaf children. I'm interested in how students could use the glossary to develop their understanding and their learning. So this is my area of work. I've been developing a school box for deaf children to use with signs in and science in. I'm doing science shows. I'm really passionate about seeing deaf children succeed. That's what gets me going. And we're looking to build on international and nationally to build our projects. Okay, so I think that's me done, and I'm going to hand quickly back to Rachel. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Wow, that's an impressive group of amount of work, and it's spread internationally. So I'm just going to finish off with 2 brief looks at the effect of the BSL Act in Scotland. And I've worked on this project with a deaf lawyer who works at the University of West of England called Rob Wilkes. He's from Wales. He has worked in Welsh universities as well. And he was interested in language policy. And initially, I think Lillian introduced us actually through evaluating the BSL Act in Scotland. We wanted to know what effect the Act had actually in the lives of deaf children. So it was passed in 2015. In 2017, we got the first national plan. And then 2018, the local councils and the universities and colleges had to make their own local plans. So we wanted to have a look at these. It was during COVID, so it was a good opportunity to do some desk-based research, which we did. So we looked at all of those plans, including the universities and the colleges. Our main findings about the councils were that they weren't making any rash moves. They were not really, didn't know really what to do with this BSL plan. They were waiting for someone to hand them a template or something to do. So a lot of them were very like, yes, well, we'll wait for Education Scotland to give us something. And of course, Education Scotland to start with didn't do anything. And one of the things that was quite upsetting was there was no focus on what was happening in the classroom. There was quite a lot of stuff about going on trips and access to parents' evenings, but actually teaching and learning seemed to be remarkably missing from most plans. And also, at the same time, as well as looking at that documentary analysis, we also did analysis of the deaf teachers group, because since 2016, we had a deaf teachers group in Scotland, which has been very supportive to deaf people who use sign and those who don't use sign, communicated with each other about the process of becoming a teacher. And we had several deaf students going through Moray House and into their probation year and into teaching, and then now promoted posts, which is nice. It's a very good support group. So when we looked at what had happened in that group, we realized that the probation year was a real area of difficulty. It wasn't microaggressions, they were major aggressions against deaf people as teachers. So that was important to understand. We tried to do something about that at Moray House by improving support for probation years as we saw deaf students going in. So that was the first report that Rob Wilkes and I did, and we really were a bit disappointed in the first national plan or the outcome of it. So we then went on to look a little bit more widely, because Rob was in Wales, and we knew in Wales, Welsh has been very successfully revived as a language. Large numbers of children speak Welsh, and large number of children who come from English-speaking homes become Welsh speakers, starting often in babyhood. So we wanted to find out how they were doing it. Also looked to Gaelic medium education in Scotland to see what they were doing right that we could possibly learn from. So this time we interviewed people at all levels of the education system and the third sector to find out in Wales and in Scotland how they thought about BSL and how they thought about that BSL could be revived, particularly in the education system. What would nurture the language best? So we did 19 interviews with key stakeholders. So the findings from this project was that it was interesting. The people who were higher up that we interviewed, who were closely connected, more closely connected with government, were more aware of the rights of deaf children to have a language and that BSL was a language. Whereas the people on the chalk face were more likely to see BSL as a communication tool. So this shows we have some way to go. You know, BSL as a language, remember 1981, that Horizon programme, still now, very recently, it's still being seen as a prop, really, rather than as a language. We also saw that a very strong influence from health coming into influence in the early years, audiology and the Cochlear Implant Centre. It's not totally surprising, that is their job, but they had no idea about how much pressure they were putting families onto just to pursue one way with all deaf children. And that enforced monolingualism has dangers. It leaves a lot of children without any language. So we were very heartened to see that the third sector in Wales and what they'd done in their preschool programme with Welsh. They had convinced large numbers of parents who spoke English at home to try Welsh. And that's the sort of lessons that we wanted to learn. And also we realised, as many people know, that there are not enough BSL teachers in schools or in the community or teaching families. So when the second national plan came along, Rob and I were quite pleased that we did get some of these points from the reports into the second national plan draft and into the final version, which was very different from the draft. So the things that I can think that we have managed to influence are to do with the health service has to now take notice of the early years and not be so negative about sign language. Well, this is the aim. Whether we succeed, we don't know. It's quite a big ask from audiologists and cochlear implant people, but secondly, that early years workers should learn BSL. At the moment, they often use something called Makaton, which is not a language, and they're not fluent in it. So we're hoping maybe a college in Glasgow might run a course for nursery nurses. This is the sort of area we hope might develop. And also there was a point 17 in the national plan that teachers should get to level SDQF 10, which is like undergraduate level of fluency. Unfortunately, it doesn't say how many teachers of deaf children are going to get to this level or by when. So it's a bit of a vague target, which could actually be achieved now. Some people are at that level. But anyway, these were things we were happy about. And thanks very much to Max, who was in the audience, who helped and had lots of discussions with us about the results of our research. So finally, I want to go back to Mary Brennan and her influence on this 50 years of research into BSL from Moray House. Mary started off, I think Liz Scott Gibson, who's in the audience, put her in touch with a deaf woman who wanted to improve her English. Mary went along every week to learn BSL and in exchange did a skill swap to teach literacy. Mary learned BSL, became curious about BSL, and then she started so many things. And in a way, Audrey and I feel that we are still working in that heritage, in that legacy, and hopefully carrying forward the work, which I think I'm fairly sure with Audrey being involved will carry on a lot longer. So this quote from Mary shows her viewpoint about human rights and language. The challenge is to embed linguistic recognition and rights within education at all levels, and it requires placing deaf people at the heart of developments. So I think we'll finish off like that. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, very important. Do you want to do the thank you for everyone?
We really want to thank so many people who've been involved over the last 50 years. Hopefully we've got their names up on the PowerPoint here. So the research, this is the members of the research team. Their names are up there. I mean, without them, I don't know what would have happened to BSL. I guess it's a big question mark. So thanks, a huge thanks to all of the people listed there. The list of names here are, the raft of names here are the people who have been involved in the glossary project. It's, as I said, it's not just Rachel and myself, it's a whole host of people that have been involved in. We've got our references. Let's just move on from those quickly. And yes, thank you so much. And any questions or comments? Hi, John. Yeah. Good evening. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was really, really interesting explanation of the whole thing from the beginning to the very end. And I know that Lillian's in the audience, Rachel, Audrey, Martin Colville, from my old school going way back. And you were talking about the development of sign language and the history of that, you know, how it has evolved over time and given deaf students access to education and their right to linguistic access. And that's really, really interesting. And I think it's when we think about the power of social media globally as well, to be able to access some of this information and see how signing is evolving because of that. You know, just to give you an example, we're seeing more one-handed sign because people are holding their phone with one hand as they're recording messages. And, it's maybe would be an area to focus on, looking at the development of the language with technology, how it's evolved. It's not disappearing. It's almost like we're becoming part of a global community because of social media, and deaf people are being influenced by the language that they see all around them. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but that might be a really interesting area to research the impact of that. Yeah, everybody's just responding with to your question, John. Really interesting. I think it is an interesting conversation. I can't really kind of respond as an individual, but I think as a community we need to think about how it's impacting. I think internationalization is a really interesting area. The Magic project is more a coming together of is more international, and it's a difficult question to answer. Maybe there's a piece of work that could be done with Harriet Watt, with the sign linguists there as well. Yeah. Jemina wants to respond to that. I knew you would want to, Jemina. Am I standing in the right place? Okay, just to add, to respond to John's conversation about Harriet Watt, we have a project at the moment looking at deaf people and technology, and how deaf people are navigating that technology, especially through COVID. I mean, as John said, there was a real outpouring on social media. So we have a deaf student who is Manio, thank you, from Japan, who just has come to do to work with mostly with deaf university students, looking at how technology has influenced that. And Vanessa, who is from Austria, who's a PhD student, who's also deaf, who's come and joined us, who's looking at social media and the impact of that, and how people talk on social media, and how maybe there's more of a connection there. But also thinking about trolling and abuse, and how. So we've got a couple of projects, but the other one is about how deaf people feel safe on social media or not.
My question is, what can be done to support probationer teachers who are deaf better?
Yeah, we have a bit of a model in that we know that some of the teachers who went through Moray House who had difficult probation years, and now we followed with some who had better probation years because of the preparation that Audrey did with the local authority, working with the probation manager of that council, making sure there was deaf awareness in the school, that the school staff had some BSL. And basically, I think it was also authority from a university saying, look, this is a language. One of the people in the deaf teachers group said she went to a probation meeting where another teacher came up to her and said, how did you get to be a teacher? You know, like not believing the equality, the possibility of a deaf person becoming a teacher. That teacher is now teaching in a mainstream school with interpreters, access to work pays for the interpreters. She's doing a great job. She's very popular as a teacher. But, you know, that was a hard battle to get through. I think that it is possible. The support of the deaf teachers group is really important. And GTCS has been in contact with that group, listened to them. I would like that to be a bit more formal and more ongoing.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Gab. I'd like to just congratulate you both on an absolutely excellent presentation. I learned such a lot, and it was very moving at times. So my question is really for Audrey. Obviously, you're involved in so many different projects. The work that you're doing in the actual classroom, the ethnographic studies that you're doing with deaf children and teachers, and with them learning science and new science around them. I wonder whether you could just explain just a little bit about some of the findings that you've started to see from the video work that you've been done. I'd be really interested to hear about some of that. So I've been visiting schools and saying for a couple of weeks or a week at a time, and visiting different classes with different ages, filming those classes, having science lessons. So I've been in primary through to some of the senior pupils, but I've been in a signing environment. I have been doing this work in a deaf school where everyone in the school is signing. So I've had the opportunity to film those classes, and I've seen young kids of children about 3 or 4 having showing prediction skills and showing scientific skills. So just to give you examples, in one class, they were given some seeds. So they were learning how to grow things. And the teacher gave them a packet of seeds. And these were sunflower seeds. And you know what color sunflower seeds are? You probably know the color of sunflower seeds. I'm seeing some nodding. So they're black and white, basically, these seeds. So I'm filming this young girl, and she's looking at the seed, and she's 4, and she's thinking, but they're yellow. So she'd already had this prediction that they would be one thing and they turned out to be another. And it just showed that even at that age, you know, with the language, young children can be curious and inquiring. I also witnessed and did some filming with an older group. And it became clear that it's very difficult to talk about concepts when you don't have the language. So this was a piece of work where these students were told to go away and prepare a presentation about AC and DC electrical currents, okay? So we have signs for them. I mean, you'll see electricity that flows between electric pylons, and DC is more these kind of things where electricity just flows in one direction. So these pupils went away to do their presentation, and they came up in front of the class, and they created these kind of rudimentary PowerPoints, and they came across the term current, which is a term that you would use in learning electricity, but they used the sign as in currently, as in now, which clearly demonstrated that they hadn't really grasped the concept, because they're using a sign that doesn't relate to the technical or the scientific meaning of the word. And what was interesting was that after this first pupil had come up, the second one came along, had been prompted with the sign, which was representative of the thing itself, and it was much more fluent, and the understanding was much more fluent. Another example is a group of 4-year-olds where they're talking about things that can float and things that will sink. So a metal spoon would sink and an orange would maybe float. And they were asked to predict which kind of things would float and which kind of things would most likely sink. And they were astonished that an apple would float, for example. I mean, I'm filming all of this as this is going on in the classroom. And the teacher is saying, so why do you think this is? Well, it's to do with this word density. And she shows them a shot from the video of the sign for density on the glossary website, which is around the density of matter in a particular subject determines whether it floats. And I've got my camera, I'm at the back of the class, and I'm thinking they're 5. There's just no way they're going to get this. It's impossible. So they've been shown the sign, but at the end of the lesson, the teacher says, so how do we know whether something is going to float or sink? And these 4 or 5-year-olds perk up with the sign for density, which was a really incredible moment that they clearly understood the concept that was being delivered to them. They might not know the word density, but they had already taken on the sign. Yeah. Hi there. Wow, what an amazing and beautiful presentation about the research and the history of BSL. I wonder if I could just make a small comment and then ask a question, if I might. So my comment is, I've been involved in teaching French Sign Language and with using and spoken French. Sorry, I'm not following this. Sorry, I'll go back for the interpreter's sake. So with a French teacher, and I'm with the French teacher, and I'm teaching the deaf children in front of me. So I've been involved in doing that. So hearing students on one side and a deaf student in front of me. Okay. And some of those students haven't understood the French language, but I've been signing and I've been translating it, and trying English, and they're still not getting it. And I tried the BSL, some of them still don't understand me. So I've stopped, maybe it's like over an 8-year period. And I kind of stopped because I think people need to have an instinctive understanding of the language before you can't really progress without that understanding. So my question was about the SQA exams that you referred to, and I know that I don't know whether students were successful using this system. I could see that this was a chemistry exam. Have you done any research in terms of the success of those exams using that system?
A very successful teacher of French Sign Language to deaf children. They very much like that teaching. It's difficult to evaluate the children who take the exams in BSL in Scotland. And that's partly because it's not under the best conditions at the moment. You know, there's not many children actually taking these exams. And Eileen Byrne's PhD research is finding out why that is. One reason is that deaf children don't know they have the right to do it because SQA website doesn't tell them anything in BSL. Parents don't know either. And not all councils tell the kids. It's also quite complicated because the system at the moment is not the PDF system we developed, but using humans. And if there's 5 people taking the same exam, only one of those children is going to get possibly the person who's the subject teacher. So there's a lot of complications around these exams, and that's partly why we're waiting for Eileen's research results, which will be really helpful for us. I think we can't evaluate what is really quite small numbers. We think at the moment far fewer children are taking the exams in sign than there are children who use sign, which means that it's not being offered to them or they don't want it for various reasons, perhaps because their teacher is sitting in front of them and they've got to ask for the translation. And there's lots of issues around it. So we can't do that yet, but we can try and improve the system.
This is Tanya, who's a member of the glossary team. I should just introduce her. I have a question. I mean, I've been thinking about social media, and I'm thinking about parents seeing signing on Facebook or TikTok, and I mean, and seeing more and more positive images. And I think maybe, you know, parents are then being influenced to think when they have a deaf child that they want them to learn signing, but then there aren't really the resources to enable them to do that. So what can we do about that? You know, where are the resources, the early years teaching resources? We don't really have any. How do we meet that challenge? How do we solve that problem? Is that something that Moray House could be involved in? Is it something that we need to approach the government, because we are seeing more and more parents, and I think this is the impact of social media, are wanting their children or their young people to learn to sign. You know, we're seeing more sign singing. It's growing. We're seeing more of it. Whereas from the teaching side, we're still getting this very negative messages about speaking, exclusive focus on developing spoken language skills.
Yeah, I'll answer this one. I think all of us in this room would probably like to know the answer to this one. It's one of the issues is that the teacher of deaf children role takes up quite a lot of room. It's a budget which is protected. Those are compulsory qualifications. We're pleased we've got teachers of deaf children, but that sometimes means that other roles can't develop, such as bilingual nursery workers. So I was doing a placement visit the other day where really both of the children I saw, aged 3 and 4, would have really benefited from about 15 hours a week of complete BSL to encourage a language which otherwise wasn't developing in 3 or 4 year olds. That's too late to not have a language. So we don't have the workforce. I'm hopeful that Glasgow, City of Glasgow College could be a good place. I have seen that before, being so old. I remember in Nottingham College in the early 1990s, there was a very good nursery nurse course there, which had a long-standing impact over the whole of England. So I think it's possible we could get that. And even one iteration of the course could have a long-term impact on the field. But yeah, that's what I hope.
Yeah, I think you You could certainly bring up that question at the Ed Sign presentation. We'll have please come and join us, because the minister, the education minister, will be at that meeting. Jenny Gurk will be there. So she'll be here and I think that's a place where we can ask some difficult questions. You know, why are people being left out and excluded? You know, together, I think we have a stronger voice. The situation is just not good enough for deaf children. Congratulations to you both for your presentations. And it was a trip down memory lane. And my journey with Martin and Liz Scott Gibson and Mary Brennan and numerous other people. I remember the BSLTA was based at Durham, and we were looking to train deaf people to become tutors, the BSL tutors. And I saw that, you know, for many of them, it gave them a huge amount of confidence that in their language, and they set up their own business as tutors and teachers. And there were many from Scotland that went to Durham to do the training and then set themselves up, and at a really, really good standard. But unfortunately, that folded. And the people who went through the Durham University courses are now older and are retiring. Some of them have given up. Some of them, you know, I think, you know, weren't happy with the rate that they were being offered when they were comparing themselves with, you know, hearing people who were doing it, who maybe had level 1. And so we want to get back to that kind of way of doing training. We need to influence the government to set up something like that, a model rather similar to that. I mean, you mentioned that we need more BSL tutors, more people trained to teach the language. If deaf children are to learn and to learn from the early years, we need to do something about that.
Hi, it's not really a question, it's just a little bit of information for you. I'm a retired teacher of the deaf from the Highlands. It's a remote and rural area where the deaf children are scattered over hundreds of miles. So the chances of learning to sign is very, very difficult for them. So we as a service, using our sign language tutor, have set up a course that we've written. It's as part of the 1+2 languages scheme, if you're aware of that. And it's to be introduced at primary 5, where we've developed a pack that's supported with lesson plans and videos of our sign language tutor giving vocabulary. It obviously starts off with very, very basic BSL signs from colours and numbers and whatever, but it's aimed at providing the class teacher with some programme that they learn alongside their pupils. So what this does is it gives everybody an awareness of sign and hopefully encourage them more to go and learn sign. We've sold this pack throughout Scotland. I think every authority in Scotland has bought this pack in, but it's not always being used. People aren't very comfortable if they don't know BSL already. But the idea is just to give an awareness that BSL is out there, it's a language, go and explore it, go and fight for the right to be able to learn it. So I just thought I'd let you know that. Thanks.
Okay, I think we need to come to the end there now. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for your attention. And I'd like to thank particularly one more question. Who is it? Oh yeah, Luigi, come on. One more, very quick.
Okay, so I'm Luigi. Again, thank you for a lovely presentation. It really kept me on the edge of my seat right the way through. So thank you so much to both of you. So I want to ask you both whether you can just, I don't know whether you agree with this or not, but if someone is trying to navigate this journey through to university, or is someone like Mary, how do they get involved in? Sorry, yeah, if you could tell us a little bit more about who Mary Brennan was. I mean, I don't know whether Liz is probably the best person in the room to speak about who Mary was, if she's, or Martin, if you want to say a little about who Mary was. Thank you so much for coming, Martin.
Well, I was going to try and say, it's a simple response, really. I have to use signed English because my voice dominates my signing. So if I switch it off, that's one thing. But Mary was given by our team because she was always right. Never wrong. Always right. And we gave it with love and affection.
Are you able to just say, or just wondering if you could say just a little bit more about?
No,
Okay,
not this
all right.
time. I think we'll have more when we do the.
Well, we were thinking we want to organize, it will be 50 years next year. So we would like to organize a special day if we possibly can. Let me just go back. Where was I? Where was I? Yes. So I was talking about next year. Thank you. So we're going to have a celebratory event of some description because it will be exactly 50 years. We'll invite everybody to Moray House and we'll talk about what happened over that last 50 years. And we'll say a lot more about who Mary was. Yeah. So I think it would be great to celebrate Mary's legacy at that time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for coming, everybody. And I'd like to maybe hand over finally to Professor Campbell. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you to everyone in the room. I saw the list of all of the thanks and all of the mentions. So thank you to everybody who has been involved in this tremendous work. I can't think on a better anniversary lecture. We support teaching and learning that is transformational. We support research that has a positive impact. We support research policy and practice connections. And you are doing all of that from classrooms through to governments and international work. So thank you for everything. And a special thanks to both of you, Audrey and Rachel, for tonight. Thank you.